Okay, so we're going to mount a miniature Phalaenopsis. So the Phalaenopsis is, I think, the orchid that everybody in the world is used to seeing. It's the thing. It's the moth orchid. It's usually the white Phalaenopsis that you see everywhere, all the time now, in every fashion magazine, in bathrooms and kitchens around the world. They're in every grocery store. This is a primary hybrid, which means that it is a hybrid between two species Phalaenopsis, Phalaenopsis pulcherrima and parishii. So this little plant is going to be a miniature. This is basically mature size on this. And you can see in here that there's actually two plants in here. There's a little tiny one right here and another one here. I don't know if you can see it from that angle. So what I want to do, I have a few of these, but what I want to do is I want to mount these. So because these are miniatures, what I can do is choose a very, very small mount. And I have two redwood mounts here that are pretty small. So they're long, and they're actually much longer than they need to be. These could actually be about this long. And trying to see if I have an appropriate mount for that, if I have something that's even smaller than this. But what I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to get a little crazy, and I'm going to, no, I'm not going to get crazy, I'm going to edit that out, don't worry. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this mount, and I always want to make sure that I have my wire in here before I put my plant in. I don't want to jar the plant around after it's already been mounted, so I want to get a lot of this work out of the way. So I'm going to squeeze in my mount, my wire, and I'm going to wrap it around, and it's ready to go. Okay, so that's ready to go. So you can see that this plant has been grown in a little basket inside of a 2-inch pot, and it's been grown in pure sphagnum moss. So I am being very gentle to get this out. I wasn't even touching the orchid, I was only touching the moss. And what I want to do here is see if I can separate these without doing any damage. If I'm going to do any damage, I'm going to stop immediately. I just, there's no point in trying to be greedy and get two plants out if you're actually going to do some damage. So I don't feel any resistance right now. They're pretty well separated. I'm not giving this really any sort of a hard time right now. I don't even really have to tease it apart. It's coming apart pretty naturally. If I felt any resistance right now, I would be stopping. So so there is the first one, the little smaller one. Sorry, that's not the smaller one, the one in my left hand is. So this is the nicer, bigger one. And you can see here, this is really beautiful. It's got very healthy living roots, very nice. It's even got a tiny little root growth coming out of here. My guess is it's going to flower pretty soon. So that's one. And this guy with a really nice root structure is number 2. So what I'm going to do with these guys is I'm going to overcompensate on the mounts here with the moss. And whenever I mount Phalaenopsis, I do use a lot of moss. The other thing, and this is particular to Phalaenopsis, Phalaenopsis, from what I understand and what I've read and heard, is Phalaenopsis in nature, they grow upside down. So they're not mounted right side up like you see them. So what I typically do when I'm mounting Phalaenopsis is I actually mount them upside down. And I'm going to do, so because I have 2 of these, I'm doing this on purpose. I'm going to mount one in each direction. I'm going to mount one up and one down on 2 different mounts, just to show how to do it. And then over time, I'll probably show the results of both ways, so you can make a informed decision if you like that way. So for this little tiny guy who's got a lot of roots, even tiny root, I don't know if you can see that, absolutely tiny. I'm going to mount this guy right side up. I'm not going to screw around with him. So what I'm going to do is so small that, and he's never going to get much bigger than this. I don't know why I'm calling him a he, but that's really it. I'm just going to cover all the roots up, and this is how I'm going to mount him. So go back to my, so this one's a bit tricky because in this situation I've got a lot of moss on here, I've got a tiny mount, and I've got a tiny orchid. So I'm going to try my best on this guy to not lose any of this moss. So the same thing I always do, I'm going to take a bit of my line, I'm going to pinch it and hold it on the back of the plant, and then I'm going to start, in this case I usually in the beginning really gently wrap, because I'm just trying to get a start on this, and I don't want to lose any of this moss. So far so good, except for the fact that, so if this ever happens, if you lose your first line, this is the one I was holding in the back, I've just found it, just popping up gently, just hold it and pull it back again, so now it's held to the back. And now this is already much easier to work with. I've got a couple of lines going across, the moss is being held on, and because this plant is so small, I'm being firm but gentle. So there's a little bit of a root exposed. I actually kind of like that because it's kind of a window into the health of the plant. And I'm going, so now at the end, what I'm going to do is I'm really gently going as high as I can with this mount, and not pulling hard. If I have bigger, more mature plants, I'll pull really tight. I'll like very, very tight. In this case, there's just no weight on this, so I don't have to pull too tight. I just have to make sure I'm relatively thorough. So the last step here is to tie it off, and again, the reason I left so much moss on this guy was because he's gonna require more water, I think, than a lot of my other plants. So when the moss gets wet, the beauty of this, when the moss gets wet, it'll stay wetter for longer, so he'll have access to more water. Okay. So that's the first one. First one's ready to go. I'll just leave that there for a second. Second one is a slightly thicker mount. I actually like this mount a lot. It's kind of cracked here. It's got this character. I really like this. So I don't have my wire ready. So real time here, I'm going to make a wire for it. So take 4 to 6 to 5 to something, whatever you feel comfortable with. Length of wire, make a little loop, tighten it a bit. I like that as the front of my mount. Stick this in, pull it in a bit, take my adjustable pliers, and for the details on all of the mounting, on how to make these wires and how to make the mounts, just check the other videos. We'll link to it here, but I have detailed videos on how to prepare all of your mounts and how to choose the right wood. So twist up, pinch it down. Now I've got a pretty nice looking mount. So this one, I think we said we were going to mount this one upside down. So my newest root is right there. So I have to make a decision. Do I want that root to go against? And I think I do. But this is a tricky one. The reason this is tricky is because these roots are growing out in between the leaf nodes. So I don't necessarily want to pile all of these leaves under the moss. And I also don't want to micromanage this process too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount. I am going to turn this up because that's the way it's facing to the sun. I'm going to take this set of roots right here and I'm going to mount with that set. I'm going to hold that together and I'm going to let this one hang freely. And I think that we get enough rain here that that'll be fine. I think it'll be real happy like that either way. So that is how I'm going to mount this. You can see some more root growth down there. Maybe I'll put one more little daub of the moss down there. Okay, so this is already upside down. So I'm going to, again, my first couple of rounds around here, all I'm really doing is trying to get the moss held in place so it doesn't fall off. And then once it's locked in or held in place, I'll get a little bit quicker and more nimble with the actual twisting. Although this plant is so tiny, it may never require that. So see, I'm taking that line and going straight in between those leaves, but I'm being really gentle. I'm just holding it down, but I'm really not giving a lot of pressure. I want it to be firm but gentle in this case. This plant is so small and these roots are so thick and luscious. I don't want to slice them or anything. So last step, snip that and just do a really simple tie. I've said this in my other videos, but it bears repeating. The worst thing you can do when you're mounting an orchid, absolute worst, is to not mount it firmly enough onto the mount and get to the point where it starts to mature, you start to get some good growth, and then it starts to flop and fall off. So this is a small plant. I don't want to mess with this too much, but if I go under here, I'm just giving this the tiniest bit of pressure and it's not moving at all. This is really nicely fixed on there. You can see the roots in there, the roots on there. I've got a lot of contact between the roots and the actual mount, the roots and the moss. So I think that's pretty good. And you can see here, that's from the same pot. And I've got one Phalaenopsis that I mounted upside down, one mounted right side up, and we'll see over time how these work out. So last but not least, and this is always critical, and just please don't forget to do this, guys, is get your labels on there right away. If you lose your label, unless you are intimately familiar with the plants you have, if you lose your label, especially if it's a hybrid, it's gone. Don't go onto the internet and try to find the plants and say, well, this looks like it. There's a million hybrids. You have no idea what it is. Keep your labels, keep them detailed, or you're going to lose it. And if you don't care, then fantastic. But there we go. Two mounted Phalaenopsis, one upside down and one right side up. Thanks for watching.